By the time you see this, I hope you've had your fill of turkey for at least the weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We're getting into the last couple of YouTubes. There'll be this one and probably one more. And then you're going to be focusing on really bringing to fruition your career development plan. And that's where I really would like you to spend your time. This one is of particular interest to me because it addresses one of the major concerns that exists in higher education today at a time when money is very, very tight. As you open up the slides on this one, please be sensitive to some names. I'll mention them because I think you need to know them to really be what I consider fully educated in the process of being leaders, learning facilitators. Sorry about that. We've got a little bit of background noise, which I can't do anything about. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me above the noise. First name comes up on slide number 2. One of the co-authors is a Canadian learning theorist named Michael Fullan, F-U-L-L-A-N. I recommend that you become comfortable with his work because he is one of the top analysts in my mind of critical thinking. I'm going to ask one of our colleagues, if she doesn't mind, to share something. This entire set of slides, and I didn't do this on purpose, Karen Rubenstein was kind enough to send me her assessment of one of the issues involved in the CDP piece. And I read it and I agreed with what she said, and I gave her a longer response back than she probably needed. But it's one of the areas I feel very, very concerned about. So hopefully Karen will post this. It has to do with the difficulty that schools face today in providing adequate support for emergent leaders to develop their potential. And the whole title of this side set is Learning Communities. And that's what we may have to do, is to define learning communities as ways of overcoming what the schools either are not able or unwilling to do. Enough of that. On the slides, you'll have a series of questions. Now, these questions, and I particularly selected these slides for that reason, are designed to assist you with the development of your CDP. That's particularly visible on slides 11 and 12. But use that. If you want to synthesize this entire presentation, it's not very hard to do. All you have to do is look at slide 21. The folks that put this together, from whom I received permission, of course, really make their point very clear. I want to make a little comment because on one of those slides, there is a comment that I have believed in for some time, and rather passionately, I might add, and that is, why view change and the future and the facilitation of learning through the eyes of a child? And it has to do with the fact that children are not as deeply programmed. And rather than give you a long metacognitive explanation of all of that, I'm going to tell you a short story. J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was one of the head physicists of the Manhattan Project, the building of the first atomic bomb under the football stadium at the old University of Chicago, when asked about the difficulty of that project, he was rather in awe of and frustrated by how much he had to change his thinking, how his paradigms no longer fit. And his comment was very telling for me. He said, I'm sure that there are kids walking the streets of Chicago who know more about the meaning of quantum physics and its application to atomic energy than I do. And I've studied it all of my life. That's the old cliche of looking at things more and more narrowly, deeper and deeper, as opposed to getting the Gestalt picture. Okay, that pretty much tells you what I think the relevance of the slides are. Now, I want to talk about the essay. EDUCAUSE is an organization you ought to be familiar with. It provides a lot of right up to the minute kind of stuff. This essay is about 5 years old. That does not make it less than relevant. It is written by a lady whose name is on it, but I would encourage you to pay attention to the editor, Diana, O-B-L-I-N-G-E-R, Oblinger. I've heard Dr. Oblinger speak several times. She is truly one of the most important creative and critical thinkers of this particular century, 21st century. So when you get a chance, maybe over the break that will be upon you soon, you might look at the internet and just see some things that Diana has done, because she truly does provide helpful insights. The whole title of that article, Abstract Learning, really grabs me, because that is the theory that one of the greatest, if not the greatest, American educator of the modern era, John Dewey, used on a regular basis. One learns best by doing. And also, you found very quickly after that comment, they comment on the concept of experimentation and then action. And I'm going to add a piece to it you've heard before. You experiment, you act, and then, as Helen Hastie and Steve Brookfield have said, you reflect on the outcome of the action before you experiment again. That's the praxis model. It's guided my thinking for the last 15 years. Okay. Another individual I'd like you to be attentive to is mentioned as a developmental psychologist, Jerome Bruner. Now, why do I want you to know Bruner? Because the work that he developed many years ago is coming back. That whole segment in there that talks about adult learners and their need as they enter new areas of endeavor. They need a scaffold to support what they do. Is that important? It's very important. I'm currently working, I'm not the chair, but I'm a committee member with one of your colleagues about a year ahead of you, who's doing a dissertation on reducing the attrition rate for nursing students in community colleges once they've actually entered the nursing program. We don't mean pre-nursing. And she is using the update of Bruner's scaffolding model, which is much, much older. It goes back to the 30s, and a Russian scholar. But the bottom line is, it is a very, very successful model. And when her dissertation is done, it's going to be a good one. I encourage you to take a look at the research design. Okay, as you move on, a couple slides after or a couple paragraphs after Bruner, they talk about the 4 essential processes. That's page 3 of the article, which talks again about something that we don't do enough of and must do much more of over the next decade or so, and that's metacognition, because it's important in critical thinking. You must know how you think and recognize that that can be an imploding rather than a broadening or exploding model. And we need to be able to get beyond the paradigms with which we are most comfortable. Okay, if you look, for example, at page 6, you're going to find a couple things that are very interesting. The first is a whole idea of simulated learning. They give you Mekong eSIM, which is a very useful tool to show how collaborative groups work together. It would work well if we were using more face-to-face. I'm not advocating that. But if we did, you could use that early in the program to get people to understand the validity of a cohort model. But you also might want to look carefully on page 6, and you notice how the individuals use, these high-powered scientists use their electronic portfolios. Gee, sounds familiar. Something you're already doing, and I was pleased to find that in the article. One of the other things they mention when we start talking about how this thing comes together is the importance of globalism, because we're going to need to be able to deal comfortably with varieties of kinds of thinking as we deal with the entire world, not just the United States or the Western Hemisphere or what have you. Come along to page 9, you're going to find 2 things. You're going to find, first of all, mention of Dan Goleman, Goleman. I've mentioned Goleman to you before. He is the emotional side of learning. He's come up with a new term, conative or conative, C-O-N-A-T-I-V-E. It talks about how that emotion tends to structure and focus and sometimes get in the way of the kind of learning we want to do. And the other thing that it's pointed to, I think very, very strongly, also on page 9, I might add, is that assessment as we do it in a more didactic kind of teaching is not as effective when we talk about innovative ways of learning. We expand beyond it, so we need to expand what we're doing. A couple of ways to end this that I think are very positive. The first has to do with something that I can vaguely remember as a very, very young student, as a high school senior, taking a physics course and learning about the half-life of certain chemicals. We were just discovering the problems with radiation and how the half-life or the deterioration factor of certain things cause radiation poisoning far later than we thought they would. Well, the point that they make here in the end of that essay is the issue of the half-life of learning. How long does stuff stay current just ask Miss Karen or Miss April about how the systems that we use, how quickly they go out of date. And so one of the things that I would recommend that you do is, and I'm going to use kind of an old cliche and turn it around, keep this whole EDUCAUSE outfit on your computer equivalent of speed dial, because you will see them again. Have a great Thanksgiving, and thank you for your attention.